Good morning, you're watching the newsroom on Hornbill TV. The much-delayed national census is likely to begin next year, according to news reports. The census exercise is expected to last till 2026, following which the government is likely to carry out delimitation of Lok Sabha seats. The census exercise has been done every 10 years since 1951 in India. The census was to take place in 2021 as a once-in-a-decade exercise, but it was delayed due to the COVID pandemic. The government on October 21st extended the tenure of Registrar General and Census Commissioner of India. According to another source, the work for the census and the NPR will begin early next year and the population data will be announced by 2026. With this, the census cycle is likely to be changed. According to the 2011 data, India's total population was 121 crore. Sex ratio was 940 females per 1,000 males. Literacy rate was 74.04% and the population growth was 17.64% from 2001 to 2011. On this topic, we'll be joined by our senior journalist, Al Nguli, from the newsroom. Hello.
Sorry, I was just getting ready.
Yes, sir. Al, thank you so much for joining us on this discussion. This 2025 census that is to be held, sir. What is the rate of population growth and fertility rates, and what other things can we expect from this 2025 census, which is happening after a long break?
That we don't know, because there have to be some kind of a criteria set out before you undertake census, because for every census that is scheduled to take place, all the regulatory frameworks, the various aspects of growth, parameters, and you have to take into account the changing times, and that is why for every census work that is to be undertaken, all the criteria are changed, but there are some indicators that are always consistent. So it could be migration, immigration, the people who may have died, who are there, their descendants, and of course there are some economic aspects to it, but generally the indicators are same. So of course from the census, as you have said, we will be knowing a little bit more about how Nagaland has changed in the past about 11 years now. It could be, like you said, fertility rates, and of course population. Population is the core of the census. We would not necessarily be looking into aspects of economics, like the way the economic surveys do. So economic surveys are basically surveys that study the economic condition of the people. How many are employed, how many are unemployed, what are their industries, how many people in certain age groups are employed in certain industries, and so on and forth. But for population, as the name itself says, it will definitely only focus on how many people are there, or how many people have passed away during the past 11 years. So the census ideally should have been conducted way back in 11, but because of the pandemic, we could not go forward with it. But again, the strange thing is that I think we took a little bit while to extend it all the way to 2025, which means the latest, the freshest census Nagaland will have in about 11 years will come out only in 2026.
Yes.
So back to the question, this is primarily about the population of the state, and from there a projection of the potential growth that the people of Nagaland and its population will see in the next 10 years.
Yes, sir. So after the census is done, there's projection about the delimitation to be happening for not just the Lok Sabha seats, but also for the assembly seats as well. And Nagaland will also be affected. Many districts, many people are going to be affected. So what kind of effect do we see that would happen after the census? What do we expect?
Generally, population censuses are exercise that also give a vision to the government in regard to its administrative imperatives in the next 10 years. So definitely there will be a lot of changes in the mechanism of statecraft here, Lee, because we have talked about delimitation now. And this is an issue I think all the communities in Nagaland have been looking forward to resolving. It is not a new issue. The Lotha people, they have been complaining about how they have been cheated of a lot of constituencies and their representations have been affected. And then there's the Sumi community who I believe they have been seeking a greater number of representation in the Legislative Assembly. But now that Newland has come up, I think somehow their community representation in that regard has somehow been fulfilled. But as you have said, that when we come with a new number in the population of the state, that means the level of demographics that will be or that will have to be represented within the administrative framework of the state will have to also increase. So now I think most people, especially the community leadership of Nagaland, they have not really been happy with Census 2011. I don't know if you have read of this, but there has been a lot of controversy in regard to 2011 over the past about 10 years.
Yes,
and many communities in Nagaland, they have rejected 2011 census of Nagaland as one of the shabbiest, shoddiest and sloppiest work when it comes to census. And there are a lot of reasons we could talk about it, but I think we'll just keep to the basics for now. It is one of the most corrugated jacket and one of the most inconsistent censuses that we had ever had, and it is considered one of the worst. And the 2011 census has a lot of inconsistencies, a lot of population discrepancies.
Yes.
And the communities have been using this census as an example of how government's incompetence can affect their socio-economic lives. And one of the reasons the numbers have not really worked up to their favor is this census is often used as a benchmark for the government to take policy decisions.
Yes.
And when you talk about delimitation, obviously we are talking about population only. When we talk about representation in the Legislative Assembly, we're talking about population only.
Yes.
When we talk about local developmental share pies, when we talk about developmental shares, and when we talk about project and funds allocation at the local level, we're talking about basically only about population.
Yes.
So when you get the population wrong, you are also going to get your vision wrong when you talk about development. So the 2011 census has not really been one of the most reliable, and there have been a lot of funny controversies after the census was released, but for now, delimitation, it will certainly be one of the impacts.
Yes.
Because the government will look at a new population.
Yes.
And whether it's right or wrong, whether it's consistent or inconsistent, they are going to make decision about local representations in the state of Nagaland based on the latest population numbers.
Yes. So, taking this picture to not just Nagaland, just not to our local picture, but taking this thing into the whole national picture, there's a big concern among the southern community, the southern Indian community as well. They are now putting questions against the government that if delimitation occurs after this 2025 census, is going to affect them and their representation in the center. Like the Article 82 of the Constitution, so it states that provided also that until the relevant figures of the first census taken after the year 2026 have been published, it shall not be necessary to readjust the allocation of seats in the House of the People of the states to readjusted on the basis of 1971 census. Now, if delimitation occurs right after the 2025 census, now that time the Article 82 has to be amended. Now, these are very big issues over here right now.
When you say south, which region did you mean?
Let us discuss about Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Goa, Andhra Pradesh, the southern India.
Now, I think the dynamics here are very different. There are certain areas, statistical data areas, there are methodology areas, there are implementation areas that I think states like Karnataka,
Yes.
Tamil Nadu or Nagaland in Assam, they might share. But I think that there are denotations and cultural connotations here. Their dynamics do not really go with us. And I don't think we can be really much be comparing with how it works down there in the south, because they are not just states, they also have a national prominence. And that is the reason why the social economic influence goes far beyond the borders of their states, Tamil Nadu or Karnataka. People don't even know Nagaland.
Exactly.
So I don't think we should really be comparing ourselves to what's happening down there in Maharashtra or Tamil Nadu or even Assam. We are not even comparable to Assam when it comes to forget population growth. That's a totally different area. The developmental projections, developmental growth. So I think we cannot really take into consideration the concerns of the South, because like I said, their dynamics are different. Our social, economic and political dynamics are different. So what we have to do is we have to wait for the census for our own state, and that is why the kind of censuses they have and the methodology that is employed by states like Nagaland and those of other states are always different. So when we have a census for our state, they are not going to take decisions for Tamil Nadu or Karnataka or Assam based on Nagaland census. They are going to take decisions based on our census. So I think the dynamics are very different there.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. But actually the thing was like not about comparison, but what I wanted to say was that South India was sharing its concerns, because as we know from the previous census, everything, the data that we have, we consider Kerala to be one of the states with the highest literacy rate. And these things might change. These things might change in the new census. And their problem, what I wanted to highlight was their problem was lack of proper political representation in the Lok Sabha.
Yeah, we have already talked about this. Definitely, if the census for Nagaland shows a growth in population, which also means that there have been a lot of new villages and towns that have come up during the past 10 years. If we have new numbers of the population, it also shows that we also have a grown demographic. People who were young way back 10 years, they are now mature enough to find employment or unemployment. So the employment demographic has also changed.
Yes.
So when we have a new census, it also means that because the population has grown, the number of towns and villages have also increased potentially, and the age groups that fit within a certain economic parameter have also grown. That means, of course, political representation. It is very simple. And based on the census that we will have in 2025, which will come out only in 2026 in case our government servants work a little more professionally and faster, we're going to have it after 1 year.
Yes.
So by the time, definitely the question of delimitation will come up. And by the way, the question of political representation in the state legislative at a higher number has always been there in Nagaland since the 80s.
Yes.
Like I said, there are a lot of advanced Naga tribes that still complain. Can you hear that? Yeah, there are a lot of complaints from some of the advanced Naga tribes that they have been cheated actually when the government started about allocating constituencies and representation in the state. So they are definitely waiting for the census, and based on it there will be a lot of communities in the state who will demand greater and higher representation in the state legislative assembly.
Yes, yes, yes. So there's a big question in my mind right now. After the new census comes out, when we ascertain how much of rural population and urban population is there in Nagaland, according to the new census, it will give rise to new questions on how the funding of the departments is going to proceed. Now, Nagaland, we have rural development department. We also have urban development department, and coming up with new projects like Smart City Kohima, Smart City Dimapur. Where will the funds be diverted into after the new census, whether in urban sector or rural sector? How can we project the allocation of funds after this census?
That is something we will have to wait for the 2025 census, Lee, because unless you get some idea of how many people are there in a town,
yes.
I don't think you will be able to really say what kind of projects will fit how many people there for you to decide.
Sir, do we see a dramatic shift? Do we see a dramatic shift?
No, like I said, unless you get the numbers right and get it specified, then this is something that we cannot plan. So that is why we have censuses every 10 years.
So with the new census coming in at 2025, this census used to be held every decade. Now with 2025, do we see this new trend of the next census happening in 2035, 2045? Is this how the trend is going to continue?
Unless there is a major election or a major disaster, unless our government dies out just suddenly, or if another pandemic comes, I think it will all be a 10-year exercise, because the pandemic that we had way back in 2021 was not something that we expected. Nobody was expecting it, and I believe that the government had already started working on it until China threw in the virus here. So unless something major, political upheaval across the country, unless some constitutional changes happen to be, or unless I say a big medical emergency happens, then I do not believe that there will be any change in the way we've been undertaking censuses. And of course, because it's like a 10 years election, it's a big event. So I don't think unless something very big happens, the state government will postpone it. We'll just go ahead with it.
Cyril, as you mentioned earlier, coming to my last question to you, as you mentioned earlier, the 2011 census was a very sloppy work according to your analysis. Now,
not mine. The government, community leaderships and researchers have already said it. There's a lot of gaps.
Okay. So how does the government benefit, or how does the common public lose from a sloppy work of census?
That's a very good question. The government doesn't lose anything. Sadly, it is never the government that loses anything. It's only the people that loses everything. So now there were people, I wouldn't say which tribe, but there was a tribe that was listed as a community with about 70 to 80,000 Lee.
Yes, sir.
Now in the census, it showed more than like 2 lakhs. There was one community. And if we look at the numbers for the Lota community, the Sumi and the Ao communities, forget those people in the remote regions. If the population of these communities were misplaced or they were not enumerated properly, just imagine how many people we may have left out or how many people we may have included. So one of the accusations was that the state government and their officials were not sincere in their work. Some of them sat at home and they just called up people and say, how many people are there? Not all of them went to their houses. That was one of the accusations. So the loss is, let's say your community has 10 lakh people, Lee, and the government has a budget for 5 lakh people only.
Yes.
Because development is not based on how much funds you get. Ideally, it is designed in such a way that it fits a certain demographic for that developmental package to fit you. So how you lose is if you get your numbers wrong, if the government get the number of people in your community wrong,
Yes.
then there is a chance that you will not be given the right amount of funds for you to be able to cover the roads that you need, the water supply that you need, the number of electricity facilities that you need. So that is one of the clearest examples of how much you lose. The government will never lose, Lee. It is the people who lose if you get your numbers wrong. And I hope we can have this discussion later on, even in the future too.
Very true, sir. So, coming back again on the same topic, now in Nagaland, right now, it's word say that the Konyak community, Eastern Nagaland Konyak community, holds the highest population now in Nagaland.
They're the highest.
So, according to that, if the elimination occurs, then we in the eastern region we get more seats in the assembly. I think that's going to help the eastern cause. I think that's going to help eastern representation in the assembly as well.
I mean, it's not just Konyak people or the eastern peoples. It's the discrepancies in the population census that was taken way back in 2001 and 2011. They don't tally. It is not there for everyone. All the numbers are not really trustworthy, and I believe that the Angami Public Organization, if I'm not mistaken, it was that organization that issued a statement way back in the early 2000s saying, you got these numbers wrong, and you got these tribes numbers wrong, and the census is not to be trusted. So yes, it is true that the Konyak people, they have a higher number of population compared to some of the communities, or generally overall too, but still then I think we should keep in mind that if their population is as high as they were enumerated earlier, and if the 2025 census is found to is found to have the same result when the new census is released, then definitely it will mean that the Konyak people will have to have a lot more people in the assembly. Their numbers, the number of their representatives have to be increased. But then again, say, we're just taking the Konyaks as an example. But if we look into the Eastern question again, there are a lot of other political dynamics at play. Right now, there is a question of demand for autonomy.
Yes.
So they want a separate administration. So we don't know in regard to the Konyak people or the Eastern peoples and how the census is going to affect them in that regard. But for other tribes and communities, we can be very sure. Those districts and communities that show a higher population rate, they are certainly going to increase the need. There's certainly going to be a need for increase in their representation.
Yes. So, Sir, we're running out of time, but thank you so much for your expertise on this topic. Thank you for your outlook, and hopefully we can continue this conversation again after the census really comes out. Thank you so much. For now, this is all we have in this newsroom discussion today. For more news and updates, keep watching Hornbill TV.